Sharif.
Thanks, Heidi. Morning, everybody. Are we on? Everybody can hear me? Great. So, my name's Sharif Nijam, and I come to you from University of Notre Dame in the United States. And I want to just give you a little bit of context about what Notre Dame is, because you might not be as familiar with my typical audience. So, we were founded only 175 years ago by a French priest, and he came to the snowy, frigid north of Indiana and said, you know what? On this site, what we're going to do is create a force for good in the world. That's my vision for this place. And so I just want to give you a little perspective into how seriously we take that.
They called us the Fighting Irish. It wasn't meant to be a compliment, but it became a source of pride. A call to grit and determination on the field.
Touchdown, Irish!
And a much greater mission off of it. A mission for a university and its community to find solutions to the world's most pressing problems and to help those most in need. Our fighters are geologists, architects, and nuclear physicists. They are biology majors and law students, peace builders and bridge builders. Their battles are fought in the aftermath of hurricanes, the front lines of revolution, and the far reaches of our solar system. They fight to eradicate disease, to bridge religious divides, and to heal our environment. These are the people of the University of Notre Dame who have answered the call. They remind us what we stand for, what we strive for, and above all, what we fight for. We are the Fighting Irish.
So hopefully that gives you a bit of context as to the mission that we take very, very seriously on campus. And so I'm in the Office of Information Technologies, and our first and foremost commitment is to deliver value. That's why we exist. And we do that by driving innovation and developing our people. And so we found ourselves in a situation where we were thinking, why move at all? This is a story, a short story about cloud transformation. Why move at all? Why would we even think about it? So we were sitting on an aging data center infrastructure. It was old, and we were facing a 7-figure investment in power and cooling to revitalize that space for the future. It's quite a bit of money. And we thought to ourselves, is that really wise? Is that good stewardship of the resources that we're entrusted to in order to provide the value to our university that our constituents demand? I'm sure it's a familiar story where you are. The pace of change and the need, the thirst, this insatiable thirst of our faculty, staff, and students for more and more technology services just doesn't stop. The pace is relentless. It keeps coming. And so we thought to ourselves, how can we take the precious resources that we have, both human and financial, and meet this growing need? The U.S. has been, plagued by awful, awful violence, really unspeakable things. And in 2012, we found ourselves thinking about the tragedies that happened at Virginia Tech University and thinking, apart from the human tragedy, part of the failure was their inability to communicate with the world. The national spotlight swung in their direction, and their communications failed. So we did some internal thinking and realized very quickly that when we put our own web presence to the test and our own emergency communication site to the test, we would have failed as well. That's something that we wanted to avoid. So we thought a little bit more about how could we actually avoid this? How could we actually avoid this? So we sat back in 2012 in the fall, and we planted a seed. We said, what if we look out at the landscape It seems like the world is doing pretty well at doing websites. It seems like Amazon is one of those places that is particularly good at hosting data that's available for the public. What if we put our public website there? What would that mean for us? So we did a bit of work with Amazon. They were great partners for us. And we did an experiment. And we designed a system that would operate our public website in an Amazon Web Services region. So in the past, we'd hosted that locally on our campus facility, which means, of course, that if we had a network incident at our border, our web presence was offline. And so by planting this seed and by doing a little bit of work, we saw some growth. We saw this nice little seedling that came up, and we actually went live with our top-level website the week that we played in a national championship game in sport. And because we were able to re-engineer this public website and think about how it could be technically implemented, we took advantage of something called auto-scaling, which is I think one of the most exciting and useful capabilities from a technical standpoint, where based on the load that's arriving at your website, you can dynamically supply additional resource on the back end. So that's something that we did. The evening of the game, we saw a 100-fold increase in traffic to our website, and nobody had to do anything. They could sit back, they could watch the game. Automatically, due to good design and good implementation, additional resources were supplied. As the traffic bled off and fell away, those resources went into a diminuendo and returned to a nominal operating state. The best part about it is the geographic diversity. So we had this long-running fantasy of we want to be able to provide our services in an active way from multiple data centers at the same time. And it's incredibly expensive to do that. It's hard. And by simply using the tools that were available to us, we achieved that. Our website today runs in 3 different geographically diverse regions, or spaces. And all we have to do is define the context of where that is. We don't have to do any of the work in terms of physical facilities. And the result has been, since that January of 13 when we went live, our most robust and resilient service that we offer to campus. Since 2013, we've had no issues with this from an ongoing operational standpoint. So that gave us a little bit of confidence. And we said, you know what, we learned a bunch as part of this process. Let's do a little bit more. Let's experiment a little bit more. We have a content management system on campus. It hosts a bunch of websites, gets a bunch of traffic. And we said, what would it look like if we moved that? What would it look like if we moved that? Let's water that little seedling that we planted. Let's place a little bit bigger bet, because it looks like we won on the first bet. Let's place a slightly bigger bet. And what happened was nobody noticed. Nobody noticed. We did a bunch of work, we moved it, and nobody noticed. Shocking. Actually, one person noticed. And the one person is the lead developer of this system, who was monitoring it the next day and said, wait a minute, I'm seeing such better performance, I'm actually worried that our site isn't working. The worst part about it, of course, was this was about half the cost that we were paying before. So then we really sat back and thought deeply, and we thought about the implications of this for our administrative systems. And we worked in partnership, this is why I love higher education. We worked in partnership with colleagues from across the United States, from Stanford in the west to Harvard in the east, University of Chicago in the middle. And we said, public cloud, public infrastructure as a service, particularly, is being adopted in industry. But nobody's really doing it in higher education. Why is that? Why are they not doing that? Why should we not do that? And so we kind of turned the question on its head. We've realized some success. We replicated authentication stores for people who are off campus. We did some work. And then we realized in every project that we've executed, there's been nothing but upside. So we said, let's get a little bit more bold about this. Let's fight for improving how we deliver services to campus. And so we set out a target and said, for the services that we operate, let's get 80% of them into the cloud in 3 years. And certainly our bias is towards software as a service first, right? So if we can do that, great. If there's a product in the market that fulfills the need that our constituents are asking us for, wonderful, let's start there. But then for anything that we have to operate, including our ERP, let's get it out there. Let's move it. In 3 years. Let's light a bit of a fire under people and give people something to rally around, right? Let's set a real goal and push for it. And honestly, when we did this, we weren't sure if we were going to make it, right? We weren't sure if the scope of what we were taking on was feasible in 3 years. But we said, you know what, let's do this. Let's try it. Let's give people something to get excited about when they come to work. And then we did it, right? We worked really hard. We have fantastic colleagues. And we just kind of put our noses down and did a lot of work and learned a bunch. And so today, you know, that tree has kind of blossomed into this kind of sizable, massive tree. And what we've really realized now is there's a variety of benefit, right? There's been a variety of benefit that we've been able to arrive at because of this work. You know, the first, my favorite one, is where are we from a financial standpoint? So what you're looking at right now is kind of a trend line. This is fiscal 14 when we decided to make the journey. This is the path that we were on, right? This is the path that we were on. And it was kind of a scary path. It's a pretty steep slope to the line if you do a little bit of regression. And we said, wow, we're going to really be up against it, especially from a storage standpoint. If we continue down this path, we'll find ourselves going back to our executive vice president and asking for another $1 million a year. Since we made that decision, we essentially stopped spending on infrastructure. We incurred the risk of taking our usual replacement cycle for specifically our storage, which was about every 4 years. We said, let's stretch that to 8 years. Why would we do that? Well, because our intention was to empty that storage array, or those collection of storage arrays. Let's get rid of them, and so we can tolerate a slight increase in failure rate, right? We're creating our own spares. And did we see an increase? Absolutely, sure. But ultimately, we were comfortable because we knew we had a plan to kind of liberate ourselves from that environment. We have a pretty big culture of sustainability on campus. We've put in geothermal wells that'll account for 15% of our local power production. We have our own power plant on campus. I love the downward trend, and I can't wait until June, because June is when our data center on campus is going to look like this. What you're looking at is basically our network head-end equipment. We will have nothing else on campus to power our administrative systems, which means that we can stop burning gas and we can stop burning coal. To me, that's a pretty nice thing to be able to talk about. So we learned a bunch of things on the way, and the first one was really bias towards action. Do something. Don't sit there and think and think and think and think incessantly about the possibilities that are presented to you. You have to learn quickly. I walked about London last Sunday, came across this sign, and I said, that's perfect. That's an absolute synopsis of the approach that we took, right? We had to get past the culture of perfectionism, and it has to be right now. Because again, if we were going to go back, our final network design, our final network architecture that we have in the cloud, we're on version 7 or 8. We didn't get it right the first time, but that's okay. That's okay. When I think about how my children have learned to walk, it's not like they just got up and started walking. They fell down a lot. Expect that, but learn from every obstacle that you hit. Invest in your people. I can't say enough about how important this is. Certainly you can make decisions around, do you choose to partner? We had conversation over the past couple of days on, is this something that you outsource, this body of work, do you insource it? What I implore you to do is to lead your people, right? These are the people that make your IT services function at your campuses. And if you invest in them, you'll get all of the returns in spades. This picture I took last week, that's a colleague of mine teaching an intro to Amazon Web Services catered to our environment, to our colleagues. We have about 250 staff in our Office of Information Technologies, half of which we've put through some type of formal training. So they're ready for this future, right? So they're ready for this future. For us, this was a zero headcount play. This was not about redundancies. This was all about what's possible in the future. And there were a lot of people who were nervous about that. Right? There were a lot of people, when we first made our bold statement, they were worried about their job because it was changing. But we made a commitment. As a leadership team, we made the commitment, no one will lose employment because of this work. What you might do has to change, certainly. And so we have fewer need for data center technicians, certainly. But if you're inspired, if you're prepared to retool, we will help you get there. We are committed to your success because it is because of your success that we all succeed. Dedicated space. I've talked to quite a few folks this week about silos and organizational silos, certainly. And the way our building was structured fostered that, right? We have multiple floors on a building. We have a lot of private office space. And what we did, somewhat ironically, is we took the machine room that was in front of our data center, and we said, let's make it habitable for humans. Right? Anybody who's been in a machine room, it's quite cold. Let's make it habitable for humans and create an open space and have people work there. And initially, there were quite a few people that did not like it. Right? They liked their office. They liked their closed door. But what we learned is that as they worked in that environment, as Heidi's the security expert, and I'm an application developer, and as those lines get slightly closer together because now we have visibility into the same tools, if I had a question, I could just roll over and ask her. And now we have people who don't want to leave, right? They enjoy learning from each other. It ultimately raises what I call the IT IQ of our staff, right? Just being in a room with people who think differently and have different functions improves what you know. So in the early days, people were very, very paranoid about security and what does this mean. To me, it's a pretty easy answer. Encrypt everything, right? Encrypt everything in transit and at rest and rethink how you think about security. We did a lot of point-to-point wiring of systems in the past, and we now think about the context of this is a secure capability. What do we want to trust here? One of my favorite things came out in November, December, is a product from Amazon called Guard Duty that basically passively scans your network. So if Heidi's a database server and I'm an application server, it knows that that is our role just by the traffic. And it knows that we talk to each other all the time. But then all of a sudden, Heidi starts talking to evil.com. Wait a minute, that's aberrant behavior. That's atypical. What's going on there, and alert folks based on it. And the friction associated with getting that up and running is clicking a checkbox, right? So what that means for our security staff is that they can now think a little bit more deeply about how do we communicate with people about security risks? How do we build trust with the rest of our campus so that when we come for the phone that's in your pocket in a couple of years, you know who we are and we're not always delivering bad news. Right? I can't say enough about automation. I mean, it's the key to success, really. And we had in production 2 weeks ago the primary database server for our ERP fail, right? One of my favorite quotes from the CTO at Amazon Web Services is, "Things fail all the time." Absolutely. Things fail all the time. Hardware breaks. It's messy, right? It's physical. Because of the efforts that we made, in 22 seconds, our primary database had failed over to its HA pair, and our services were back up and running. And I had this conversation with our lead DBA, and I said, "That's an amazing thing. Why did that happen?" He said, "It happened because of Oracle." I said, "No, it didn't. Because you could give me Oracle and it wouldn't happen. It happened because of you, right? It happens because of you, because you're an expert at what you do, because you've learned, and because you've designed, and you've tested, and you have the knowledge to create a system that's like that." That makes me feel fantastic. I was like, yes, that's what I want to see. I want to see you really owning your area of expertise, right? And using it to transform what would have 10 years ago been a catastrophic event for our campus. Oh my heavens, where are the spares? What broke? Root cause, to essentially a dropped call on your mobile, right? And yes, not everything came back in 22 seconds. Not everything. But that's where we get to have interesting conversations with our vendors about connection pooling and resiliency. Because I don't know about you, but we don't write that much software. We write a lot of integrations, but not that much software. And so what we've found as we've been through this journey is we have to have a lot of conversations with our vendors around, it seems as though you're not really database connection fault tolerant. So we had to do a little bit of manual work to bring your system back. Can you please work on that? Right? We have an electronic content management system on campus that we have to run a file server in Amazon, which is fine, but our preference would be, can you just please use object storage natively? And we worked with them and worked with them and worked with them, and that's something they were able to deliver to us last fall. To me, that's where I'd rather spend our human capital, right? That's delivering not only value for us, but it's delivering value for anybody who uses the same product set. One of my favorite things is the concept of really understanding what is it that you provide, right? And taking this big, bright spotlight and shining it in every nook and cranny of your service catalog. Because let me tell you, I don't know about you, but what's in your basement and what's in your attic is very reminiscent of what's been kind of collecting in your IT systems over the years. And what we found is that we were able to retire over 20% of the services that we were providing. 20%. Why? Well, because maybe 15 years ago it made sense to write a custom web application to collect form data on the internet. Well, now we have Qualtrics, now we have Google Forms. You don't need to maintain that application anymore. But of course it was running happily, didn't really require maintenance, well, except for the platform. So now you can start to have more interesting conversations with your constituents about the life cycle of the applications, especially the custom applications that have been developed on their behalf. Do they really need to exist? Historically, we've done a very poor job of getting to the end of the life cycle. And that's something we've invested in over the past couple of years, is to help people through the grieving process, right? But to leave behind systems that can be replaced by something that we already have. Let's use platforms instead of systems, right? Let's use software instead of platforms. This was a once in a career, I think, maybe once or twice in a career opportunity to fundamentally change and drive value out of the IT organization without impacting whatsoever the business function of the university. So if you think about replacing an ERP system, it's catastrophic, right? How disruptive that is to all your business practices. Even if you go piecemeal, it changes what people do. My favorite thing about this whole story is that it's a pure IT play, right? You can determine over the course of this work what just needs to be moved because it's old and it uses file attached storage and isn't designed for the cloud because it's based on millions of lines of code from the 80s and 90s, to what you re-engineer, like our website, to what you just, kind of get rid of. But communicating with campus offers you this opportunity because I would hazard a guess that there are people on your campuses today that are already doing this. You just don't know about it, right? You just don't know about it. So we became very vocal and established a community of practice on campus because we also realize we have a group of dedicated and brilliant people, but we're not the sole source of excellence on campus. So we have a good partnership with our library, who happens to be geographically quite close, and they push the edges of technology in ways that we don't. We're happy to work together and learn from each other. In my mind, every person in your IT organization historically has been blissfully unaware of cost. I think that changes now. Because what we do is we give every person in our organization access from a read-only standpoint to see everything that's running in Amazon. Which also means we see the cost of everything that's running there. And what we've done, in the context of shifting roles, we used to have somebody whose job it was to manage the ins and outs of our data center, coordinate shipments, coordinate arrival, installation. We've changed his role to be essentially a financial engineer whose job it is to look for usage and waste and performance and lead our monthly cost conversations to say, hey, Heidi, it looks like your service is costing us a lot, but you're not using very much of the capacity. Why is that? Is that right-sized? I'm not sure about that. And what that leads to, it's kind of a busy chart, and I apologize, but the important thing to look at here is if there's a bar up there, it's waste. It is waste. And because we specifically took that bias towards action at the beginning, we knew that we would be somewhat wasteful in our rush to get done. And you can see that, right? You can see this waste. But as we've finished the bulk of our migration work, we've gotten a lot better. We've gotten a lot better at managing the cost of the infrastructure that we use, right? We're driving that out. And my opinion, I would say it's a fact, is that we can take even more costs out of our infrastructure by using things like the spot market that we have a philosophical awareness of right now, but no practical experience. So what I've asked my team to do is to say, for any load-balanced application, please let me know in March why it shouldn't be running on spot. Since we're aware that there are multiple people on campus who have a need to do research, what we want to do is make it easy for them. We want to take friction out of that environment and let them get to their research as quickly as possible. And so what we've developed is this kind of linked account strategy where our business office maintains a master payer account, and then all you need to do to start your research is say, hey, I'd like an account, and here's my billing code. We'll do the work to create the account. We'll do the work to separate out the root credentials in that account so they don't get compromised. And the user ID and the multi-factor token are physically separated by team. We'll provision you access to it, and then we will just hit your bill every month for any charges that you incur. Okay, that's a good start. The other thing we'll do is we'll work with you to understand what those costs are, and we'll develop billing trigger alerts that make sense. So we had a researcher who partnered with a Chinese university to bring up a copy of aminor.org, which is essentially like a version of Google Scholar. And all of a sudden, our billing folks said, holy smokes, you went from $0 to $10,000 a month. You know, we didn't even notice, except for the bill. And so we called them up, and they're like, oh yeah, we know, we just went live. So think about that. Think about what just happened. They didn't have to call us. They didn't have to ask for resources. This was work that they were capable of doing on their own. We just had to get out of their way, right? We just had to get out of their way and help them understand the implications from a cost standpoint. Goes without saying, I'm sure this is an easy one to spend time on, but please, please, please don't duplicate credentials all over the place. Use the access that you have already. Multi-factor is a must, right? It's just a non-starter. If you don't, just get that done. And don't get distracted. It's really easy to do. I mean, if you think of the rate at which cloud providers turn out new innovation, it's easy to get distracted by what's up and coming, right? I mean, when we went live with our website, the ability to cordon off and carve up private IP space in Amazon didn't exist, right? It just didn't exist. So the rate at which the services that are available to us, the rate at which those are developing is accelerating at a pace that is hard to keep up with. And it's easy to get distracted. It's why you have to be relentless about your focus in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, right? And we said very, very early on in the context of just selecting a partner with whom to work, we said we're going to make a decision. We're going to stick to this decision for 5 years. And in those ensuing 5 years, we hear this swirl of multi-cloud strategy and hybrid and all of these things. And we said that's all fine, but this is what we're doing because we don't want to have this argument every time we start a new project, right? This is our strategy. We're committed to it, and we'll reevaluate. At this point, we're thrilled and have no intention on changing direction at this point. And really enjoy the journey. So this was taken during the cutover of our ERP system, which, by the way, we budgeted 3 calendar days for, and the team got done in 18 hours. Well, why? Because they had the ability to create that crash and burn environment, test it repeatedly, and we engaged our business partners around the university to do that validation. So despite the fact that we said, we need 3 days to do this, the team got it done very, very quickly, to the point where one of our folks could take some time out actually during migration day to play a bit of a video game, which is kind of funny. So what does this mean? All of this work, why do you even do this? This is what I'd ask you. Why do you exist? Why does your organization exist? Is it to provide IT services? Is it to rack and stack equipment? Or is it to fundamentally empower your university to do things that are so important that no one else can? I would argue it's the latter. So because of the fact that we've done this body of work, because of the fact that our next hardware refresh is a reboot, because of the fact that that whole body of work around vendor negotiation and racking and stacking and, forget it. It's just, who could be bothered? We just don't do that anymore. Because we don't spend resources on that, we can spend resources on things that are much more important. So we're in the top 5 every year in terms of the students that we retain from first year to second year, right? And many people would be thrilled to have numbers like that, but we find ourselves thinking, well, how can we get better? How can we improve that? Because if our admissions folks are doing their jobs right, everybody who sets foot on our campus should be able to thrive and succeed. How can we help that? And so it liberates our people to draw a bunch of pictures on a whiteboard and then turn them into working software, right? That aggregates information. We have a course in our first year of studies that every freshman has to take. It's a 2-semester course. 114 sections, a bit over 2,000 students. So we're looking for 40 students. We're looking for the 40 students who are not going to thrive. Can we build something like this that actually changes the course of people's lives? The answer is yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We were able to, by investigating patterns of engagement, by partnering with faculty in the context of curricular design, able to create alerts based on student engagement and predictors of success. And we're very deliberate in the language that we use. We don't talk about intervention. We don't talk about, rescuing somebody. We talk about giving people a boost, right? Because that's all they need, right? How do we give people a little nudge, a little boost to help them thrive? And I define thrive as if you're earning a B or better in a class, right? We can tell based on how these students engage whether or not they're exhibiting patterns that are going to lead them to an unpleasant result. Because if it's happening in this one course, what's the likelihood that it's happening in the rest of their curriculum? That behavior, those patterns of behavior. And what we found is that by giving people just an electronic nudge 3 weeks into the semester, by working with their advisors at the midway point of the semester, not only were we able to identify 94% of those students, 83% of those students were thriving by semester's end. That gives me chills on my arm because 2 years ago, those students wouldn't be coming back to campus or they'd be on academic probation. To me, that's why we exist, right? It doesn't stop here. This is nice, but now let's think about something much more serious. Let's think about student mental health. Let's think about people who decide to take their own life. We have access to and the ability to aggregate data and start to look for patterns and indicators that can prevent that. I believe that to be true. And I firmly believe that that's an impact that we can make. To me, that's why I go to work every day, right? Not to mon up a server. And then really, the beauty is in the possibility. The beauty is in the possibility because you've invested in people, because you trust the people that are around you, and you're bound to them. They can think creatively, right? They can think about, hey, we use this product for teleconferencing, but we get exorbitant charges for storage there. So let's use a serverless architecture to extract that content and push it into our Google Drive space that's free to us because we're higher education, right? To me, that's creativity. To me, that's something that I'll celebrate. Let's think about, the possibilities that continue to come out. So that little camera on the side is an Amazon Deep Lens, which has AI embedded in it, and it does the fun things where if you smile and hold a pint of beer, it says, "You like beer." Great. But so that's kind of fun. But what does that mean for a lecturer who wants to innovate and be a little bit different and say, hey, I have this lecture, I have 2 sections. Can we use something like that to gauge student engagement in difference in how you deliver content differently? What are the implications for an instructor who's delivering online learning? Deep Lens isn't appropriate there yet, but it's the kind of thing that I want our folks to think about. I want our folks as high in the value chain as possible, right? And because of our commitment to them, that's where they can operate. So I implore you, you are, I'm looking out at this room, you are responsible for thousands of people, right? You lead the higher ed IT organizations in the UK. I implore you to be bold, to invest in your people, to imagine what's possible, to go into work with a sense of optimism. Yes, there are challenges. Rob talked about them yesterday. There are budget pressures, absolutely. But fixate on what's possible. Fixate on what's possible. Lead your organizations forward. Prepare your people for the future because it's here today, and you'll be rewarded. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Questions, folks? Yep, I'm here.
Actually, mine's a financial one. Is that working?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Mine's a financial one.
Sure.
If you you stopped investing capital, obviously, so was the university comfortable with you spending, obviously, revenue on that, and how did you persuade them that that was the right thing to do?
Sure. So the question was a financial one, and mainly around if I'm reading this right, the transition from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. So we're very fortunate because we have an executive vice president who's a finance professor by training. And when we first started having this conversation with him about moving to the cloud, he is not a technology person at all, right? He's not a technology person. He's actually very, very hard on his laptop. But what he asked us is, 300 years ago, would you have put your money in a bank? And would you do that today? So he understood thematically what was possible, and he trusts us as an operating unit to say, hey, this is your budget. However you use that budget, if you purchase equipment or if you rent equipment, that's on you. I trust you to do that because you have this proven track record of being responsible and of delivering. So I'm not going to get in your business. I'm not going to ask those questions because we have that relationship and that track record of delivery. Sure.
No? Then can we thank Sharif? Oh, there's one over there. I was going to say I've never seen a cartwheel done on this stage before.
One of the issues with moving to a revenue-based model is the control of the expenditure. Ordinarily, an organization will raise a purchase order, and then for that purchase order, they will get goods delivered to the value of their purchase order. When you move to the AWS revenue model, if somebody ticks the wrong box on a server, then you can scale up, and you can suddenly find that by day 3 of the month, you've actually burnt through the entire amount of money you were expecting to spend on that service for a month.
Sure.
So from a financial control perspective, this is kind of different from the way that we ordinarily financially control pretty much every other purchase in the organization. And we don't normally entrust very high levels of expenditure or the risk of somebody ticking the wrong box and the consequential cost to quite junior staff without really a level of financial oversight. How do you manage that challenge within your organization?
Sure. So the question really is about the possibility of having it all go wrong and spending a bunch of money that you didn't intend to do. So first and foremost, we have financial controls in place, right? So we have billing alerts in place that alert us day of if there is any spike or unexpected spike in our expenditure. That's number one. Number two is that we're pretty rigorous in terms of who has the ability to actually tick that box. So in the early days, we were starry-eyed and excited about, oh my heavens, now that people have this capability to software define their infrastructure, this is wonderful. We can really empower people to get things done. And then we kind of stepped back and said, well, wait a second. We've developed teams of experts over time because there's value there, right? So our platform engineering team exists because they know how to harden operating systems and build them in a very, very consistent manner. So we expect them to be the only group, at least in administrative systems, the only group to be actually ticking those boxes, right? And then it becomes a partnership conversation between those engineers that have the ability to do that. It's a small number of people. It's not widely distributed to the entire organization. It becomes a partnership with those people and then whoever is the service or application owner of what's being delivered to talk about performance.
More, and then we'll go for coffee over there. Yeah.
At Middlesex University, we've done something similar, but one of the issues we're finding is vulnerability assessment. So you can have AWS scanning your services. You can make sure that the operating systems are fully patched and all the rest of it, but the application layer is something different. Mm-hmm. The application layer sits with the end user often. So what measures have you put in place to make sure that the actual application layer and therefore the data is always kept as secure as possible and as patched as possible? And I'm not just talking about routine patches in that regard.
So if I understand the question, it's kind of twofold. It says, you know, from a physical standpoint, that's on AWS. That's not your responsibility, certainly. But everything from the operating system up, how do you make sure that that's in a state that's as secure as possible? Okay. So basically we have a couple of schools of thought there. First of all, we have regular patch windows in terms of operating system, but the real danger, as you pointed out, right, is at the application layer. And so we do, before a new application goes to production, we do our own security scan to ensure is there vulnerability to cross-site scripting or any other host of potential attacks, and let's get that remediated before it gets to production. And then after it's in production, it's something that we do scan on an occasional basis for new vulnerabilities.
Okay. I think we're going to call it a day there. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for a very informative talk.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I had a lot of fun.